Hi everyone, so as promised, this time I'm going to show you how I create my effect with the trees with the fog in between them. So to start with, I like to section off an area that I'm planning to fill with the trees, and then I like to paint everything around it. So this is actually my newest illustration that I'm working on, and it's going to be a meadow scene with the hiker in the meadow. But before creating my smoky mountains or my smoky hillside here, I painted the sky, I painted the mountain in the background, and then I painted my meadow. I haven't filled in any other details. As you can see, I still have something that I'm going to be putting here, but I have my hillside where I'm going to put the trees kind of sectioned off. Okay, once sectioned off, I'm going to be adding paint, and I'm going to be using this dark green, which you can mix on your own if you want to do some blue and yellow together. Adding a little more blue and yellow. Okay, so I'm gonna fill this whole hillside with this nice dark green color. And as I paint, I'm actually gonna leave some of the brush strokes in there because I like that texture in there. So while I'm waiting for the paint to dry, you're going to use some sort of thicker paper or cardboard. I'm using watercolor paper. And you're going to cut out the shape of the tree out of that paper. Okay, so you want to make sure that everything is completely dry. Dried to the touch, not sticky or tacky feeling. And when it is, then you want to take a brush. I like using kind of a smaller brush, and it needs to be damp. So I'm dipping it in water, and then I'm just kind of blotting it out on a paper towel. Then I'm going to come in with some white paint, and I want to kind of brush it off on my palette a little bit. So I have paint on here, but it's not thick or globby. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cutout little triangle for my trees, and I'm going to start with this front row here, and I'm going to set it where I want it, and then I'm going to start out by painting on the white tree, and I'm going to kind of blot around it. So I'm just, and I tend to save brushes for this because it does tend to mess up your bristles a little bit, but I'm just going to blot, 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 blot. And sometimes it moves a little bit, and I'll come back with a little more paint. Blot, 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 blot around it. And then I'm just gonna peel it off real quick, and I have my first tree. And then I'm gonna go ahead right next to it, and I'm gonna do that again. And don't worry if you feel like the white kind of looks a little blotchy right now. It'll start to kind of fade in, and the nice thing about acrylic paint is you can always go back and you can kind of play with it a little bit too. Your brush will have to be wet for that though if you want to go back and fix things. So I'm blotting around this one, and you want to make sure to get around that point really well, and then I'll peel that one off. And I'll keep going, and usually I like to do the whole first row, and then I'll start building up from there. And the nice thing about working with a triangle like this is you can change the size of your tree. So this triangle using the whole entire one is going to be my biggest size tree in here. And then as I go up, I can start to just use the tip for smaller trees as well. All right, so as you can see, I'm making good progress on my row. One thing I forgot to mention is keeping your brush damp. So I probably finished, I would say, around 8 or 9 trees before dipping my brush again in the water, so it'll stay damp for a while. When you start to notice it's a little harder to get the paint down or it's coming out in globs, you'll just want to dip your brush in the water again, use the paper towel to kind of blot it on both sides, and then you can continue going across. Okay, I finished the first row, so I want to go into talking about the second. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing here. So what I'm going to be doing is building onto my first row. And so I'm going to take my little piece of paper that I cut out, and I can choose, I can have some taller trees sticking out and then maybe some smaller trees too. I'm going to do the same thing again, make sure my brush is damp, and then I'm going to go in, oh, and my brush needs to be dampened. I thought it was okay, but it's not. I'm going to go in and add some white around this. And then I'm going to pull the paper off. And I'm going to keep on adding my second row, and then I'll just keep moving up from there. And the rows as you go will become less and less like rows, and it'll just be a little more like filling in trees in the gaps. So the hillside's now completely done, and you can see I still have a line right here kind of separating the trees from the sky. What I typically do with that is I'll go back and I'll paint some of my sky color in between the trees so that I have some of the trees popping out. So that would be the last step, and then you would be completely done. Thanks for joining me on this tutorial, and for my next one I will be talking about how to paint aspen trees for my next painting.